This video, we are going to be talking about Chapter 7 Soil Agriculture and the Future of Food from the Essential Environment, the Science Behind the Stories textbook. So, this is really talking about farms and our plant management over time. The chapter starts talking about the University of Michigan. It has some cool videos about what they're doing with students, and they have some cool videos that I've looked up, like this one from Farm to Table, how they're using campus students to um, grow food and then use that food in their different cafeterias. So here are some of the things that they're doing on their college campus. The food is made to order instead of made ahead, so there's less waste. There's trayless dining, smaller portions, so people aren't wasting as much. Leftover food is composted. They're offering vegetarian, vegan, and sustainable food options. So in the growth of the human population, we have needed to make more food. And what we have seen is that as the world population has increased, if this is the line here from the 60s to current, we actually have been able to ramp up food production in a huge way of fruits, vegetables, grains, and different root products, which is great to meet the demand. However, there still remains that there's about 800 million people in the world suffer from malnutrition and have something called food insecurity, where they're not 100% sure that they'll get their next meal or when their meals may run out. I actually worked with a program in Guatemala called Cultiva, and this is what we did. We used money from American donors to make these container gardens with the women that had like 1 foot by 1 foot squares that we would plant various crops in. And each 1 foot square had different things that would protect the square next to it and grow at different times. So they provided these container gardens for like a third world country, like people there, that would offer them vegetables throughout the year. And so you can sponsor programs like that if you're interested, but it there are innovative practices like this where people can get the food that they need if we just apply what we know. So malnutrition is basically the shortage of different nutrients, such as having the proper amount of like fats, proteins, vitamins, and minerals. And there's various very sad problems that can develop if you do not have those proper nutrients. So agriculture is the practice of raising crops and livestock. So we use rangeland for grazing livestock. And today, about 1 in every 3 acres of land on the earth is used for the production of food for either direct use by humans or use by animals that will feed humans. So a lot of farmers, just because it's easy, have what's called monocultures, where they grow a single crop in very orderly rows. The problem is this doesn't work well with the natural ecosystem as much as having integrated food crops together. So there's a really cool TED Ed called The Future of Food that I recommend watching, where they're talking about just using our modern innovations with coupling that with farming to make sure that plants are getting the water that they need and the resources that they need, but we're growing crops where they can be maximized as well. So we tend to treat soil like dirt, but soil is actually full of a lot of living things, as well as disintegrated like rocks and other materials. But soil should be considered like almost like a slowly forming but living thing. So it's made of a few different things. There's the parent material, which is the the primary material that the soil is made out of in that area. For instance, you can have um, like an area that we live in Southern California. A lot of places are made out of decaying lava rock. So bedrock is the mass of rock that makes up the Earth's crust. And I want to get to, Oh, and how it's initially broken down is through weathering. So you can have physical weathering, which can happen because of physical contact, like wind, rain, freezing. You can have chemical weathering, where the bedrock is initially broken down, like the lava rock is broken down by different um, gases or slight acidic wear, etc. Or you can have biological weathering, where different like living things come and grow on it and break it up over time. So soil generally forms really slowly, but that depends on what's there, like climate, different organisms, the topography, meaning like how hilly it is or flat. It is where, if it's exposed to a lot of rain, it's going to make soil faster or slower, and what the parent material is, but it does all take a lot of time. However, once you dig into the soil, you will see that there are distinct soil horizons, and it makes up a soil profile. And soil profiles are different wherever you go. So here's a soil horizon here, where the organic matter, these are the dead and decaying leaves and things like that are on the top, and those are slowly being broken down. This is an important layer that kind of builds new soil. And then underneath, you have a very fertile layer underneath that that's protected by the organic leaf layer, called the topsoil. Underneath that, you have the leaching layer. The leaching layer is where, if there's a lot of water in the area, it will run through these first two layers and it'll pull all the nutrients out of it into this leaching layer and downward towards like the subsoil. And so in some areas that are really rainy and wet, they don't have good topsoil because it those minerals have leached downward. And we see that a lot in like the rainforest, where there is a lot of plant growth, but it's not due to nutrients in the soil. It's really just like nutrients in like the tree layers that exist in the rainforest. But if you take that away, it doesn't make good farmland below, which is another tragedy of chopping down the rainforest for farmland, because it's not good soil anyways, because it's been heavily leached down below to the lower levels, where you can have subsoils where different minerals will accumulate, but it's very deep, and then the weathered plant material, and then just straight rock. In some areas of Southern California, for instance, you will have very deep layers and really great soil horizons. There's other places in Southern California where it's very lava rockish, and you are hitting rock just a few inches to a foot down, where you can see that we haven't created much topsoil here yet. Like erosion, or well, erosion has happened, but that process of creating soil over time has taken a long time in certain places. Okay. Um, so those are all the different layers. So areas like in the central, like in the middle of the United States, we have some very nutrient rich topsoils in places like Kansas, Iowa. They have amazing topsoil and they can really grow fantastic crops there. And in fact, they grow much better crops than places like the rainforest. So when the rainforests are chopped down, because the soil is so poor, a lot of times people do this method called slash and burn, where they cut everything there. They will burn the trees to make some nutrients in the soil, but that gets leached out really quickly with rain, so they have to slash and burn again in a new place the next year or time they need to rotate their crops, so that they have nutrients again. So it's a really sad, wasteful process, where we have better farmland on earth that we could use for that. So a lot of crops require extra irrigation, where water is brought in. About 70% of the fresh water that humans use is on plants. Problems with irrigation: sometimes we waterlog plants where we give them too much water, and sometimes irrigation can add to a salt buildup in the land where it needs to be you got to walk away from that soil for a while until that salt kind of leaches out. So, plants only use about 40% of the fresh water we dump on them. So we do want to be careful with how much we, placing crops in the right places where they can grow best. We also see problems with adding fertilizers to plants. Some are inorganic fertilizers, meaning we mine them and they're just different like minerals, and some are organic fertilizers where it's like waste or plant debris that has been chopped up and reused again. So, uh, over time, farmers have relied on fertilizer use more and more. A lot of this gets washed down, especially in Southern California, and out to the oceans, making different algae blooms after it rains. This can be bad for the environment. As much as possible, you should probably try to have like natural fertilizers. And there was a cool video on like composting and how that works, and using your own plant material instead of getting rid of it to fertilize future plants. So precision agriculture is something that we've already talked about, but basically it's only um, applying things like fertilizer when needed, and then working to not lose soil, making sure that we don't have erosion. Um, you can see things like over cultivating, like poor planning or poor plowing, can add to a lot of erosion happening, or clearing like forests or farming on slopes where a lot of erosion is happening is not good for topsoil, and it wastes a lot of water. um, Over time, places that were not deserts can become deserts over time, and that's called desertification. We've seen that in some areas of Southern California, and it's really hard to recover from that over time. So, when soil is lost, it's a big problem because it takes a very long time. You cannot just go to the store and keep buying soil endlessly. Um, in response to losing soil, the United States government passed the Soil Conservation Act of 1935 that established um, an agency to help prevent erosion. And some of the things that they did is rotating crops from one season to the next, changing their plowing methods to make sure that when you're on a hillside, you use something like terracing, where it goes down in steps so that the water doesn't just straight run down. It has more time to absorb. They also have done things like intercropping, where they mix different types of crops in the straight line. So different plants have higher water needs, lower water needs, and also creating these, which you can see in Southern California and out towards Southern Arizona, where they have shelter belts, where they have large trees and things like that to guard the plants so that soil doesn't just get blown away. One way that farmers are controlling pests, um, and to a farmer, a pest is anything that is going to eat their plants. So even though we might not see something like a monarch butterfly as a pest, or a swallowtail that might eat citrus tree leaves, we maybe don't see those as a pest. For the farmer who's trying to sell that product, it is a pest. And so a lot of times these things get used, different pesticides to kill insects, herbicides that kill plants, and fungicides that will kill fungi. And there's some pros and cons to these, and there's a TED ed on the pros and cons of pesticides. We've seen that they do help increase crop production. I'm sorry, going back and forth. We have seen that they do increase crop production quite a bit, but at the same time, when we broadly apply pesticides, not only do some become resistant to it, but we kill a lot of good insects that we want, like some of our pollinators, like bees, as well. And some of these pesticides stay for a long time in the environment and are not good. Some farmers use something called biological control. This is really hurting the monarchs in Southern California. Tachnid flies are a fly that will come down and they will lay an egg inside of a caterpillar. The egg will develop inside the caterpillar and eat it alive. There's a whole video on this. It's kind of sad and disgusting, but I have seen them come in and lay their eggs inside a monarch. It's like they're hitting them with a dart really quickly, and the monarch falls down and writhes in pain and then gets up and keeps eating. Well, slowly that egg grows inside, and the monarch feels ickier and ickier by the day until it eventually dies, and then the tachnid fly, like basically its egg comes out and it hatches or whatever. So farmers have used this as a biological control in Southern California, and we've seen it really take a toll on different like butterflies and things that we do want. Why are farmers using it? Because it attacks bad caterpillars and things that are killing their crops. So this biological control, it's like a double-edged sword. It gives us better crops and it helps the farming method, but it's also killing some of the bright and beautiful and happy things. So we just need to be careful with how it's being used. Another thing that farmers have used is Bacillus thermogenesis, which is BT. It's a soil bacteria that farmers have integrated into the DNA of plants. So it's been integrated in, and so the plant just naturally grows this chemical which will kill caterpillars or anything that basically eats the plant. So instead of having to spray the plant with it, it's just in the DNA of the plant. So if a caterpillar comes and eats that plant, it will die because that chemical is in it. Well, again, double-edged sword, we might be killing some things that we don't want to. So an integrated pest management is one where farmers don't just take one approach to saving their crop, they take multiple. They maybe apply chemical pesticides, maybe they rotate crops, maybe they have genetically modified foods. That would be ones that are like growing like the BT inside of them. They usually do multiple things to preserve their crops, and that has increased crop production over time quite a bit. Another problem that we've seen with this is the colony collapse disorder, where bees are dying in large quantities that were never seen before, and it's really alarming to scientists, and we're hoping, and the farmers are hoping this too. They don't want the bees to go away, but they're working, on slimmer and slimmer margins. It's harder to get water. So they're in this too, where they don't necessarily want to kill the good things, but something needs to be worked out, and we're still working on all that tech. So we've talked about this before with the pyramid of energy, but in the pyramid of energy, each level that you go up the chain, there's less and less energy available compared to all the energy that came down from the sun originally. Well, what that has to do with food, and I'm sorry I clicked again when I shouldn't have, is that the amount of feed to feed a cow to produce 1 kilogram of beef is about 20 kilograms of food have to go into a cow to make 1 kilogram of beef. Well, down here, though, you only have to put about 2.8 kilograms of food into a chicken to get a kilogram of chicken. So, in other words, it's much more efficient to eat, chicken as far as how much energy we had to put into it compared to a cow. And then a pig is a lot more efficient than a cow, but eating eggs as a protein source is a lot more efficient than eating pork. So you can see how that goes down. So cattle actually contribute to about 14% of our total greenhouse gases. However, if you look at other animals or protein sources, they contribute a lot less to our total greenhouse gases. So it's arguable that they're bad for the environment, or you should eat some animals that take a little less resources than a cow where possible. So we already talked about genetically modified organisms, but that's basically where we take some of the DNA from something like a bacteria that maybe has a lethal gene, and we add it to the DNA of the plant. And maybe that doesn't hurt us, but it maybe kills an organism that is eating the leaves of the plant or something like that. And so those are called genetically modified organisms because we're integrating pieces of the DNA into the DNA of the plant. To help save the plant. So, some people are very pro this because it's helped our food sources grow, and some people are very against this. So here's some different genetically modified foods like BT cotton that has the BT integrated into it. Roundup Ready, meaning you can um, squirt Roundup all over this crop and it'll kill the weeds, but not this plant directly. Virus resistance crops. And this one is genetically engineered to have extra vitamin A to fight vitamin A deficiencies. So here's other ones. It's estimated that about 70% of our processed foods contain at least one genetically modified organisms. And the sale of genetically modified seeds have increased, not just in the United States, but around the world over time. So, the Conservation Reserve Program was established in 1985. It was paying farmers to convert um, damaged cropland into conservation reserves. Um, some reasons to use genetically modified foods is to basically reduce poverty and allow people food, to not have to clear more land for farming because we can be more productive just in a smaller space, to conserve water, to improve nutrition, and to reduce outer pesticide use, like that's sprayed generally on the outside of plants. So that those would be like arguments for having more genetically modified food. Organic foods are foods that are grown more naturally, and this is regulated to varying degrees in different places. But in 1990, the Organic Food Production Act established national standards of what could be considered organic. About 80% of Americans will eat organic sometimes, and most people have replied that if organic is about the same price, they'd rather have organic food. So usually those are at different farmers markets. Um, so to make this more organic food possible, it will need to provide food security and make sure that there's enough. It needs to be profitable for farmers so they're not losing money, because otherwise they run out of resources. And it has to conserve resources for future agriculture. So that is the end of this slideshow and this chapter 7 on farming.